Joining me today is Dalesa Bady, and she is a career coach and strategist. And we're going to be talking about how to stand out online by owning your niche, something that Dalesa does beautifully. But before we get into it, I must give her a moment to shine. You tell us more about yourself, anything you'd like us to know. And thank you so much for being here with me today. Take it away.
My pleasure. I am such a fan of your work, CJ. So thank you for having me today. It's such an honor. I am the founder and CEO of Pursue What Matters. I am also a career coach for women in insurance, and I'm primarily focused on helping them secure and multi-six-figure leadership deals in the insurance space. I come from a 15-year background in insurance. And so looking at my journey, which I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more about, it's felt like a natural transition and a natural progression into the coaching space and serving women leaders in insurance. So I'm excited to talk a little bit more about niching.
We are connected on LinkedIn. I see your content all the time. And like I said before we started recording, I used you as an example, actually, in a coaching session when the client and I were talking about niching down. And I said, there's someone I know in my network that she speaks to a very particular person, does it beautifully, and it resonates with who it needs to resonate with. And I think that's exactly what we need to remember when it comes to niching down. Before we get into talking about like niching and the topic today, one of the things I always like to ask my guests is this employee to entrepreneur journey. If you are still running it as a side hustle, if it's a full-time gig, and just if you have transitioned, how that was. Tell us all the things. Because I know when we first connected, it was over a year ago or close to a year ago, I feel like you were still in employee side hustle mode, and that might have changed. So fill me in, update me.
Yeah, absolutely. So you're right. The last time we spoke, I likely was still working full time. I still have my full-time job. Since then, I have actually transitioned away from that. So I am a full-time entrepreneur, a full-time business owner, and I have been in this full-time position for a year, actually. The end of this month would be a year. And so my journey, it's a little interesting because for the last few years, and I honestly, I stand by this to this very day, my story, it was already written.
Yeah.
My journey, my experiences, they've already been written for me, and I'm just living them out even as we speak right now. And one of the things that was really interesting for me was just the fact that it took me a while to get to this point and even get to the stage of even considering starting my own business. And what's even more interesting is that my mom, she never fit the corporate mold. She had a lot of different jobs. She's a very creative person. And even today, she's actually a multi-business owner. And I would have never imagined in a million years that she would, in a sense, be the mold for me in my former years, because that never crossed my mind. I was just assuming that I would live in corporate and retire there. But it wasn't until 2020, 2021, somewhere around that time that I even considered starting my own business. And truth be told, at that time, my full-time job was perfectly fine. I mean, I guess no job is perfect, but relatively speaking, I didn't have many complaints in that job. Like, I was doing work that I enjoyed. I was really good with people. I was leading a team. I was really good at processing information and presenting ideas. And I was doing all of that. But in the back of my mind, there was something just in the most subtlest of ways. There was something that was telling me your gifts and your talents, they need to be shared on a much, much, much bigger scale. I didn't know exactly what that was. It took me another 18 months to even consider coaching as an option for me to go down. And then it also took me within that time. It also occurred to me
Okay.
too that I could start my business within the coaching space. So in the summer of 2022, I got a coaching certification. I picked up a new client, which was really great for my confidence. Within a few weeks of that, I made the decision to hire one of my first business coaches. At that particular time, I was just a casual browser on LinkedIn. I definitely did not have the activity level that I do today. But at that time, I came across his work. I think I might need his support. So we decided to work together. And since then, I mean, my business has taken off in so many different shapes and sizes. It's taken me on so many different paths that honestly, I would not have even imagined. And to get to this point of actually serving women in insurance, that was a journey within itself. I did not start off that way. Well, when I first started, I didn't really have an audience. I was just like, I like coaching. I like helping people. I just want to help. It doesn't matter who it is. You can be, blue, purple, yellow, it can be whatever. I didn't have anything in mind. And then through the course of getting that help, that business coach, getting that level of support, that's when I realized that, no, Dalesa, you need to speak to someone. Mm-hmm. So honestly, it went up and down for me. I think I started off as just helping women. Then it was Black women. And then at one point I was like, ooh, I'm going to do STEM. I'm going to help women in STEM. And it's going to be, the best thing ever because STEM is an underrepresented group for Black women and women of color. That's what I'm going to do. But then after some time, another coach of mine, she was like, Dalesa, no, that's not your group. Like, are you the S? Are you the T? Are you the E? Are you the M? She was like, that's not, you're not, no. Beginning of last year was when I finally settled on, okay, insurance. And then within insurance, of course, there's different profiles. And then leaders just happen to be a very natural evolution from there.
Right.
Needless to say, I'm giving you the long tail of all of this. Looking back on where it started, which was around 2022 to about now, I'm looking at about a 3-year journey. It's been wonderful. It's been great.
With settling on a niche and speaking to a very, very specific group, and your business is doing well, you're serving the clients that you want to serve. And one of the things that always comes up when talking about niching down is people are afraid that they're going to miss certain people. Like, well, what if, because we know you talk to everyone, really, you're not talking to anyone, because you try to speak to everyone, your message gets very, very confusing. So to hear you say that you figured out your niche, you honed in on that niche, and it's working really, really well for you, I think is exactly what these side hustle women need to hear, that it's okay. You might have to test and the other thing too is our ideal client or target audience or niche, it can evolve, much like it sounds like yours did. You're like, I'm going to try this, until you settled on this. So once you decided on your niche, you said, okay, this is who I'm going to talk to. This is who I'm going to deliver my message to. This is who needs me. Was there any kind of shift you feel like that happened for you in the online space that really kind of validated that you made the right decision?
I would absolutely say that. I would say there were a number of different moments that allowed me to say, oh, okay, I'm in the right space. Like, this is exactly where I need to be. And one of those moments, it sticks out like a sore thumb to me. And it comes from one of my clients. I want to say I met her in the summer of last year. We were just having, just an introductory chat, just to get to know one another. And one of the things that she had said still like blows me away today is, I did not know that people like you existed for people like me. And she works in the insurance space. She, right now, she works in claims. We are working on helping, really getting her to the point to where she's transitioning into a completely different space within the insurance industry. But that statement alone honestly showed me the power of niching down, and also the power of being able to, because there's one thing to niche down, but it's like a whole nother thing to really immerse yourself in that space and actually be your audience, like be a part of their lives and be a part of how they think, being able to understand Like, what specific things are they going through? Like, can I actually speak to them? Can I actually relate to them? I think that's really important. I mean, obviously there's a lot of information that you can gain and gather just from simply having a conversation. But if you're not able to understand how do I get into a conversation with them, it makes it a lot harder to actually get that information. For me, there were a lot of different moments that happened, but one that really stands out to me is just hearing the feedback from all the women that I speak to, all the clients that I have up to this point, and being able to serve people within a very small space, I think helps a ton. And even when we think about niching down in our minds, it feels like the opportunity is really small. But even as I think about the number of people that are on this planet, the number of people that are living in this country, there are a lot of people. And even within the insurance space, I mean, the insurance industry is a $2 to $3 billion industry just within the US alone. So like the opportunity is so much bigger than I believe what we actually think about, because our minds are very much so, our minds are thinking on a much smaller level.
What do you feel like her focus needs to be so she can confidently make the decision that I'm going to focus on a smaller group? This is my niche. Because typically my clients always I have this income goal. I want to make so and so amount of money in 3 months. So in 6 months, I want to have blah, 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 because it's another stream of income, having this side hustle. And usually there's a lot of work to get to the point of understanding in order to attract the money, and there's money mindset, et cetera, that needs to be taken into consideration before you really start, your relationship with money, before you really start talking about the money you want to make. But is there a decision that she needs to make for herself in her mind or in her marketing to say, okay, this is what I need to do first in order to get to the point where I am attracting the right people so that I can hit that income goal and so that I can attract those clients? They come in wanting to make money, wanting the business to grow, wanting to have this many clients, because usually in my experience, at this point, they're really hasty about leaving the 9 to 5. So in order to leave the 9 to 5, they got to make this money, got to do da. Right? So they almost want to speed up the process, right? In 3 months, I need to have 6 clients, and I'm almost just like, okay. But is there something that she should be focusing on to get to that point where she's confident about her ideal client, about her niche, so that she can create the content for marketing and everything is resonating with who it needs to resonate with? So the money essentially comes easier and the clients come easier for her as well.
I think one thing that's really important, and this is something that I still live by even to this very day. I didn't see it as much when I was first starting out, but the idea of being able to test things, because I do think it's one thing to have an idea in your mind. This is the product that I'm putting out. These are the services that I plan on offering. This is the audience that I have in mind. I do think there is a level of expectations versus, to your point, the reality of things. There needs to be a decision that's made very early on that I'm going to experiment and I'm going to test things. And if things don't really work out the way that I envisioned, that's okay. Let's move on to the next idea or the next thing that I want to test out, because I think that's really important. I mean, if you have a product in mind, but you're not so clear, you're not sure on what that pathway would be in order to ramp it up and get it to a certain sales goal or revenue goal per month, having an idea of what that testing period is going to look like, I think is so critical to help inform what that pathway could be. For me, I honestly feel like less is more. So if you have an idea of what things, of what kind of products and services you want to start off with, focus on one. Have one offer, have one group that you sell it to, test it out, see what happens. I had this envision that I was just going to help, any woman that looked like me. And while I do think that there's something powerful about that, I do think it is important to really understand exactly who your audience is.
Yeah.
I know CJ, we've talked about this before, about being able to understand your audience, being able to understand your buyer, going through that process of really getting to know them, really getting to understand, okay, what are their challenges? What are their struggles? What are their dreams and aspirations? What kind of buyer are they? How do they think about things? What gets them going? What kind of resources are they tapped into? I think really being able to immerse yourself in your buyer and being able to understand things from their perspective helps a ton.
And like our ideal client, when we describe our ideal client, we're describing ourselves. That tends to happen for many coaches. But what I have learned through my coaching journey is that's great because we feel like we understand our ideal client, but we've already gone through the experience or gone through the journey and now want to help others. So if we want to make sure that their needs are being met and that their problems and their challenges are understood, we also have to understand that their problems and challenges will be different from mine. So I'm not necessarily describing myself as my ideal client. What do you think about when it comes to niching down, when it comes to identifying your ideal client and their problem, their challenges, their fears, all that, about ego and removing ego? Do you think ego is the thing that gets in the way of people wanting to niche down so that they can, show up better online?
I think that's certainly part of it. I also think we have, even just as human beings, we have this inclination of maybe a little bit of FOMO, where it's like, well, if I exclude all of these other people and I'm just focused on this one group, does that also mean I'm missing out on all these other opportunities? And maybe all those other opportunities are tied to this vision of a person who's rich and who's making all the money, and money's just like coming down off of trees. Like, I do think there's this sense of almost like kind of like this celebrity kind of feel, like I'm highly wanted, I'm highly needed by this big audience. And of course, things get a little bit more scarce when you start drilling down and only focusing on one particular group. But there was a quote that I read the other day. It said, the riches are in the niches. And I thought that was really interesting because, I mean, there are coaches, there are people who have been able to serve one particular audience and do extremely well, just by understanding that group and just by providing a solution to a problem.
Fear of showing up online or putting yourself out online or putting your message out online, and how will people receive it and what will people say and blah, blah, blah. But then I feel like there's so much confidence that will come out of when I create this offer, I put this offer out there. I know exactly what they need. I know exactly the transformation that they're going for. And then you are able to show up even more confidently, and you're probably more willing to show up online because I'm just talking to one person. Right? Almost like you're picturing yourself walking into a room and it's just you and one other person there. I'm always using analogies. You realize that, you and this one other person are talking, but then, the door to the room is open and somebody else walks by and they're like, that sounds like me. And then they will come in or they might send a message to a friend and say, you need to be here. So before you know it, that niche or that one person you're trying to describe, you're trying to speak to, you realize there's a group of them and they're more willing to listen to you, to know, like, and trust you. And from that, they just open up their wallets and they just want to work with you. So with the mindset coach in me now wants to ask these questions. Have you ever had any moments of like, am I doing the right thing? Am I delivering? Is my offer the right type of offer for this person? Or was it just once you started coaching people in that niche that it just made sense because of the feedback you had gotten? You didn't have to deal with that? Or did you go through a moment of like, is this right? Like, am I on the right track here? Is this going to work out? Am I doing all the right things? That imposter syndrome. Did you deal with any imposter syndrome?
Absolutely. I can relate to the constant doubts, the constant thinking, like, am I on the right track here? Like, am I actually needed? I mean, am I providing something that's useful? And I think that's only natural to feel that way, especially especially when you're within the realm of having to be the face of your brand. And sometimes when you're the face of your brand and you're the face of your product, getting those no's, or like getting those like, I'll have to think about that. I'm not sure if this is for me. You start to internalize that a little bit. So of course, I certainly had a number of daily occurrences of feeling as if I'm not really sure if this is the right space for me. It's hard, especially early on, to manage that. I think being in the corporate space, looking at my journey over the last 15 years, there's a level of protection that you're afforded, especially when you're working in corporate. And so there's a huge difference when we talk about having to work within a corporate environment versus working within an entrepreneurial environment. And I think one of those differences is being able to actually handle rejection. Rejection is something that I did not experience a whole lot when I was working full time in the insurance space, but I became very familiar with it when I started my coaching business. And it's something I still experience today as well, but managing it has gotten a lot better because now I actually have the receipts. I know that my products, my services, my coaching offer actually does get results. And so that certainly helped managing
client just this past
those
week
self-doubts.
that, 9 years in, like I still have those moments of like, I hope, am I helping her? Is this exactly what she needs? Am I saying all the right things? But, the client, on the other hand, is showing up excited and so open and so, receptive to everything I'm saying. So it was just to remind her, like, it's a part of the journey, just like the rejection absolutely is. But the rejection is, there's so much that we can learn or so much that we can take away from the rejection instead of just saying, oh, well, this person didn't want to work with me. It's a moment to take a step back and evaluate, oh, can I say something differently? Do I need to tweak my offer? Do I need to show up in a different room? Is it my sales pitch? Or instead of just saying, oh God, another one, I lost another one, right? So the journey in entrepreneurship is as much a personal journey as it is a professional journey. And part of that professional journey, of course, is you understanding that you can't help everyone. Like, just like you said, there are so many people on the planet and so many people within a certain niche. And are you really trying to help every single one of them? I highly, highly doubt it. With you.
Right.
Just to demonstrate that you can be successful even when you do really, really, really niche down, even when you are really, really, really specific. Yes, I can hammer it home to, drive it home to my clients, and we can work on all the different things and target audiences and ideal clients and, language and messaging. But to have someone who's actually, living proof that, I went through and this is what worked and this is who I speak to now and business is good. Right? Of course, you had your moments in the beginning where you had to figure things out. I love that, you said you hired a coach and you said one of my business coaches. I'm like, girl has had more than one coach because coaches always need coaches. Now we're saying that business is going really well. Things are taking off for Dalesa as she niches down and she shows up beautifully in the online space. Is there anything that you're working on? Is there anything that you have coming up? Is there anything that people should be knowing about from Dalesa?
Well, I certainly have a few things in the fire, but one thing that is very much so constant in my business is that every month I host free virtual workshops. And really, that's an opportunity for folks in my audience, folks who just feel like they need my expertise and my guidance, for them to come on for 90 minutes. And I specifically teach them how to secure multi-six-figure offers. And it has been such a blessing because what I do is I actually create a space for not only for women to learn, but really for women to actually get some stuff done. If you're interested, you can find me on LinkedIn. I am super active there. Just send me a message. I'll make sure to give you all the details
from you, and even
through other
observe
mediums
you
as
and how
well.
you interact with your niche, interact with your ideal client, your target audience, and how flawlessly you do it. Because whenever you do show up on my LinkedIn feed, and for example, I am not your ideal client, right? But whenever you do show up on my LinkedIn feed, I'm just kind of like, yes, like, you know what I mean? Everything is so crisp and clear, and you know, the confidence is there in your message. And I guess just from now that you've mentioned that you tried a couple other groups as well, and thinking about when we first connected to like where you are now, and whenever you show up on my feed, I'm just like, okay, I see this girl. Everything has fallen into place. Everything does make sense, and you've done the work. You've been on the journey. You're still on the journey, and it absolutely does work. Okay, so before I completely let you go, I have to ask you for a nugget. Something just to wrap up our conversation. We're talking about standing out in the online space, owning your niche. We're thinking about when you were in that that employee side hustle space, and really trying to figure out your next steps. Do you have a nugget to share with us today?
One thing that I will 100% share, because I do think it's so applicable, especially thinking about that phase where you're starting something while you're still working full time, or maybe even if you're thinking about transitioning from a full-time employee into the CEO of your own company, being okay with being a beginner.
Okay.
And that was extremely hard for me because I was coming off of being in an environment where I was like the Beyonce, and like I was great. I I had great performance reviews. Everyone loved me. It was great. You know, I was pretty much like at the pinnacle, honestly, of my career. But then having to start something new, even if it's something that you're really passionate about, there are going to be moments and there are going to be times where things don't work out the way that you want them to. And so being comfortable with being in that beginner stage, which means having to go back to the drawing board, having to do things, having to experiment multiple times to figure out, okay, what's working, what's not working, what do I need to do better next time? It's so critical. I mean, it is hard, obviously easier said than done. It is extremely hard, but I will say being comfortable with being uncomfortable and being comfortable
and I love
with
that you
just
brought
being
that
in
up,
that beginner mode.
And I said that to my coach at the time. I'm like, well, there's so many other coaches out here that are, you know, why would somebody want to hire me? Why would they come to me? How would I attract them? Dealing with that imposter syndrome and feeling like you're supposed to know all of the things if people are going to trust you, but you're starting your journey. You're at the beginning of your journey, and there's going to be a lot of growth, and there are going to be a lot of times you stumble, fall flat in your face, and you're going to pick yourself back up and dust yourself off and keep going. And as I said earlier, it's as much a personal journey as it is a professional journey. Being okay with being a beginner is a beautiful way to wrap up this conversation that we had today, Dalesa. Thank you so much for joining me today and just sharing your story and giving hope to many women who are very much in the beginning stages or trying to figure out, who do I talk to? How do I show up? And knowing you're basically giving them permission to say, you know, you don't have to have it all figured out today, right? Like, so thank you so much for joining me today. And I appreciate you. I'm wishing you so much more growth and success. I'm always cheering you on. I'm in your corner all the way, my girl.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate that. And this has been great. Thank you again for having me.